off with so loud. Start off with public comments. Brian, do we have anybody?
No one has signed up. I did forward a written comment to the commission about a week ago, but no one has indicated giving spoken testimony today. So if there's anyone in the audience, feel free to raise your Zoom hand. If not, we can. Oh, we do have one. Here we go. Sorry about that, Albert. I'm gonna let you in now.
Okay. Welcome back, Albert.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Did somebody give me a thumbs up? Okay, great, thanks. Hi from Jenkintown, Pennsylvania. I came before you last month just to ask again what's going on with the Friends of Trees contract. And, I haven't heard anything new about that, so I'm assuming there isn't anything new, but if there is something new, I'd love to know about it. Given the recent heat that we've all been experiencing, I'm more concerned than ever that we are missing an opportunity to plant more trees in Portland. And I think getting the Friends of Trees contract back is imperative. And so I hope that is something that you all are discussing or will discuss. I'd like to ask you to add it to your agenda in the future. And if you have other plans that I don't know about for planting lots and lots and lots and lots, repeat as many times as you want trees in Portland and beyond, I'd like to hear about it. And I'm sure other people are curious what you have planned, because losing that contract, I think, has been a really awful thing for our city. So that is my commentary, and someone else is talking, so I will get off. And thank you all for the good work you're doing.
Thanks, Albert. There's a lot of background noise there, so I think if I could just summarize your question and comment, it was about update on the Friends of Trees contract, and if there was any news about that could be shared at this point. I think what we're going to be spending a good chunk of the day today speaking with Director Long for Portland Parks and Rec, as well as Director Uchiyama with Bureau of Environmental Services about a agreement that the two bureaus have come to. So that this issue may come up, I'm not sure, but they'll be speaking about this later today. So if you want to hang on to that question, we'll have a little bit of we'll have a half hour with Director Long and Uchiyama, Directors Long and Uchiyama, to talk about some of these issues. So unless there's anything else anybody wants to respond to, I'm gonna kind of move on to.
Thank you.
Yeah, move on to anybody else who wants public comment. Okay.
I don't see anyone else.
All right. Well, thanks for showing up from afar, Albert. Your commitment coast to coast is showing through. Thank you. I will want to move over to the July minutes. Brian, thanks for sending those out a few days ago. If I want to give everyone just a few minutes if you haven't had a chance to look them over yet, but I'm hoping you did, but just to go through the minutes. Give you 2 minutes for the minutes, and then we'll I need a call to vote. Ashley, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to acknowledge, I think Adrian or perhaps Roberta had asked last meeting to number the bullet points under the headings, and I did not get that format done for the July minutes, but we should have them done for August and September and moving forward, so you can see what that looks like.
Super. Thanks, Ashley, for that reminder as well. And if you could add to that also, the page numbers would be helpful as well in the minutes. That'd be great. So a couple of minutes here. All right, anybody? Can I see if there's anybody willing to start with the approval process of the minutes, revisions, any changes of any kind to this July set of minutes?
Bruce, good catch. I saw your change.
I had one minor edit that I sent forward. It's just a technical change, but I would suggest I move that we accept the minutes as edited.
Okay, do you want to vocalize the edit, or is that?
The edit is just that in under the Forester's report, there was reference to fringe trees and olive trees. They're not in the genus Fraxinus. They're all in the same family. So it's just a minor edit.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Great. Thanks for keeping it sciencey. Great. We will. That was a motion, I think, Bruce. So we'll.
Yes.
Can I see if there's a second?
Second.
Thanks, Adrian. Adrian seconds. So let me call all in favor of the motion with edited minutes to be approved. Raise your virtual or physical hand. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3. Okay. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, so moved. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Brian, for those minutes. That's great. We're right on time, moving into Forester's report. Jen, can I turn it over to you?
Sure can, Vivek. Good morning, all. Good to see you. For this morning's report, I have 8 items. Since we're talking about numbering to make things easier to track, it's easier for me as well. The first is a seasonal reminder that the city's Dutch elm disease management program continues, as it has for many years. And this year's summer activities with DED are wrapping up. DED is a fungus that spreads among elm trees. It is lethal and has resulted in dramatic tree losses across the United States. And as part of the city's program each summer, Urban Forestry monitors the elm trees across the city, which we have inventoried and keep track of, for signs of Dutch elm disease. Trees that are showing signs of DED are tested for its presence, the disease's presence, the fungus's presence, and the affected trees are removed to help limit the spread and further tree losses. So each year, a report on these activities is prepared and posted on our website, and we anticipate to report on this past summer's activities and findings at an upcoming Urban Forestry Commission meeting. Next item I have is last month, sort of related to pests and pathogens, I was asked to provide an update on emerald ash borer, EAB. Emerald ash borer is an insect that kills ash trees and has caused tremendous tree and forest losses in the eastern and midwestern United States. Until very recently, it hadn't been detected in the West, and we now have it detected for the first time in Oregon just within the past couple months. And I'll ask you to please refer to previous editions of Tree Bark you received and the Urban Forestry website for details, including, importantly, how to identify and report suspected detections of EAB, monitoring, looking for, identifying other infestations is a real priority at this point. Also, an update currently, Oregon Department of Forestry is leading and coordinating response and management of emerald ash borer in the state, in Oregon. The city of Portland is a partner and a participant in that work with our staff, Urban Forestry staff, on a recently formed state management coordination task force. The state is also identifying funding for management and response activities to emerald ash borer. And there will, of course, be more information on this as it develops. It is a new issue that we're all getting our heads around and tackling. The next item, 4th item, I'm happy to share that the recently passed Federal Inflation Reduction Act contains $1.5 billion for urban and community forestry. This is an unprecedented amount of federal funding. Yeah. This was covered in national media. I saw Leah's thumbs up, so you may have seen about this from other sources. But I wanted to let you know that Portland is one of a network of so-called vanguard cities and organizations nationally that worked to have this funding included in that legislation with the purpose of helping to address the climate crisis and equity through urban trees. So implementation is the next thing to happen, and that is to be determined. Urban Forestry, Portland Parks and Recreation, and the city's Intergovernmental Affairs Office are engaged in tracking the topic as it moves forward, and there will be more information on that as it develops. On my fifth item, I'm also very happy to share that the city is preparing a pilot for a new type of street tree planting. And this specific pilot is an outcome of the recent pedestrian design guide update, which you all likely remember, that included provisions for planting street trees in the what's called the curb zone, so in the area where cars can be parked, at least in some streets. Urban Forestry, as you know, participated extensively in the guide update, which was led by the Portland Bureau of Transportation. And this curb zone street tree planting is one outcome of that work. It's actually there documented in the approved and adopted pedestrian design guide. So in order to activate the design guide, Bureau of Transportation and Urban Forestry are developing this pilot. Our pilot proposal recently was awarded a grant from the Bureau of Environmental Services called a Percent for Green grant, and that's to help further development, to further development and implementation of that pilot. It's still in very early developmental stages, but the funding is essential, so that's a great early step, and there'll be more information on that, of course, as it develops. It's very exciting to see a whole new area potentially available for street tree planting in the future. Sixth item, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff are planning to visit the Forestry Commission about the city's climate action plan and including the commission's comments at City Council on that topic. And that's currently planned for the December meeting. So there's something to make note of and look forward to. And seventh item, today's agenda includes information about a memorandum of understanding between Portland Parks and Recreation and Bureau of Environmental Services from our bureau directors in regards to city tree planting activities. And I have often routinely updated the commission on the coordination work between Bureau of Environmental Services and Parks planting programs, and our goals to seek to eliminate programmatic overlap and improve efficiency and outcomes in terms of tree planting by the city. So the MOU is the result of this process, a result of this process. You received that MOU by email from Brian yesterday, and it's also on the Urban Forestry Commission website. So a lot more about that today, and as Vivek mentioned. And then finally, today's agenda also includes a brief update on the Portland Parks and Recreation Sustainable Future Ballot Initiative Task Force's work. They are working to identify sustainable, longer-term funding solutions to meet the Bureau's long-term operational and capital funding needs. And this work includes seeking to identify resources for city-funded street tree maintenance. Street tree maintenance, as a reminder, according to the city's policies, is the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. And so Sustainable Future is specifically trying to address that policy. Daniel has been representing the commission on this task force for the last few months. Thank you, Daniel, for that time and energy you're putting to that. And the brief update this month will be followed with time for questions today. And then next month, we're planning on having a more comprehensive agenda item after the task force concludes their work and a report can be given on that work. That concludes my comments, my report. If anyone has questions, please let me know.
Jen, Daniel had a question about responsibility for maintaining the new curb trees.
Yeah, to be determined. You know, we're operating from a place right now of the city's policy is the city's policy. So as we're meaning adjacent property owner responsibility, So as we're developing the project, we have to keep that very closely in mind, but we'll see about the outcome.
Okay. All right, TBD. Bruce, I see your hand up. And then go ahead.
Curb planting, are you talking about places where it's unimproved? There's no curb, no sidewalk, or I'm a little confused by your use of the word.
No, that's not it, Bruce, and I'll put the link in the chat for you to go and look at the pedestrian design guide update. I'm using their language. The curb zone is where cars are typically parked inside the curb. So rather than the tree being behind the curb, between the curb and the sidewalk in the tree planting strip or a well, the tree would be planted where a car might otherwise be parked.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, the car
Okay.
won't park there. So I think of it this way, Bruce, it's creating more space for trees in that parking area. So kind of delineating the parking spaces with trees potentially.
Thank you.
Yep. Oh, Brian has put it in the chat. Thank you, Brian. There's the link to the pedestrian design guide update.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Brian. Adrian.
Yeah, a couple of questions. So how big is that pilot? And, you know, sort of what are the measures of success on that? And then the second thing is, and maybe it's for another time to hear more about Emerald Ash Borer and, you know, the sort of the outlook and what areas would be most affected, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so Adrian, good questions. The pilot is not to the point of being able to say the size or the metrics that we'll use to evaluate success or challenges we find with it. Of course, we will. That's essential to a pilot. We will have criteria to evaluate success by. But really, funding is the first step because that in part determines the size of the pilot. And regarding EAB, yes, there'll be more information when we have more to share. There isn't right now.
A quick follow-up, Jen, on that first question Adrian had. Do you have you got a sense for if the pilot were successful and it all works well, what that might lead to in terms of increases in the number of trees or generally the amount of urban forest in the city?
Since we don't have any of that information yet, Vivek.
Okay. Okay. All right, Bruce, your hand's up, I think, from a previous one. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Jen? Okay.
Roberta asked in the chat how much was the grant for? I believe it was $500,000. Is that right, Jen?
That is correct.
Okay. And is it Angie that's leading that up?
No, that's not. We have our tree inspection regulatory staff because initially it's about design and regulatory standards, and I'm leading it right now.
Okay, great. Very interesting project.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there are other places that have piloted this kind of a project before or even fully put it into code.
It is a practice, Vivek, that I have seen myself in Europe. The PBOT team is responsible for researching how it has played out in other places and bringing that information to the project. So we're not to that point yet either.
Okay. All right. Well, we are, for the first time ever, coming in a little early with end of the Urban Foresters report and questions. So we actually have a minute here before we turn it over to Director Long and Uchiyama. I'm wondering if we could potentially talk. I mean, this is 8 minutes, a little risky, but I'm really interested in hearing things that are on commissioners' minds these days, and love to go a little round robin if we could make use of this time. Like, what are you thinking about? What are you hearing from the community in terms of trees, urban forests? This is a precious little bit of time, so I will stop talking and see if there's things that are coming up. And if there's nothing, that's fine too, but just if you're keeping the pulse on what's going on around you with the community, it'd be really great to get this into the minutes and even into our future agenda items that might emerge. Thoughts? Roberta?
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. Just one thing I've been curious about and hoping for is more information and communication with, I guess, with planning and sustainability and maybe development services about monitoring the implementation of the new codes that for residential infill, both in multi-dwelling zones and then the formerly single dwelling zones, as relates to trees. I think this is something that I don't know. I know they're going to be doing some monitoring for meeting housing goals, but it would be great to learn more about other monitoring. And if trees kind of aren't on the radar, maybe a communication from the Forestry Commission requesting that, because VDS, I think, has been tracking a lot of data on tree preservation standards, how they're working Title 11 and planting and stuff for the Title 11 tracking that we'll be hopefully using as we move forward with Title 11 updates in the future. But it would be great to look at specifically at how kind of different kinds of development types that are going to be allowed in the future as they play out. What does that mean for trees and impervious areas? So maybe you guys know what that is, but maybe, I mean, the staff, or maybe we could request more information from BPS and BDS about how that they might be monitoring that or make that request.
So I guess it's in part a data question, Roberta, is that right? Like trying to understand what the implications are and if there's any both kind of speculation about that or even assessments that have been done about that?
Right. I mean, it'd be good to kind of collect data over time about that so that as we look to what it means in the future as the city builds out. I don't know that that analysis was done before the codes were adopted, but certainly as we go forward, part of the tracking should be what happens to the canopy and where, and I think there's a role for the city in doing that. They can do that because development services keeps track of trees in, trees out, and so forth. So it'd be cool to figure out a strategy for doing that and integrating that with whatever other monitoring is going on for whatever other goals are related to those code changes.
Any thoughts, responses to that? I think it's from urban forestry staff or commissioners.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Roberta. That is, I think, how good policies are made, seeing what are the outcomes and being able to circle back given what we find. So we've heard you and we can look into that. Thank you.
Thanks. And if you feel like you need a communication, we could take it up at the policy committee if the commission, feels that's appropriate. So look forward to hearing back again. Thanks.
Yeah, Roberta, and that brings up for me the things I am talking to folks around the city, and the thing that keeps coming up is this kind of almost trembly question in conversations about, do we know what the implications of this is going to be for our urban forest? And that's a question I've heard probably half a dozen times at least. And I can just remember back on the Better Housing by Design, which those commissioners who were on the Urban Forestry Commission about a year to 2 years ago would remember we had presentations by Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff who had moved forward on this multifamily residential project looking at increasing density in multifamily residential zones. And they had actually conducted some of those evaluations of seeing what are the implications on, they worked with us on heat in relation to these increases in density of specific neighborhoods. And so that, and city blocks even. And so that it harkens back to that assessment that we did a little bit of kind of, we know we can do those kinds of future projections. And so part of it would be really relevant in terms of how we could think about it from residential infill as well. But single family residential this time. So thank you for that question. All right, Bruce, last one before we turn it over, we'll see if Director Uchiyama, welcome, Director Long, Adina, good to see you.
Just a short comment, probably by the end of the month, I'll have my document on the street tree survey on major north-south streets in East Portland, and also a part of that is an environmental history of East Portland and some recommendations as to how we can get more trees out there. Once that's available, then I'll be looking for outreach to advocate for some of the many changes we need on 82nd, 102nd, 122nd, 148th, and 162nd. So should be a fun ride. So, but I'll share that report with you once it's done, and it should be done. We're in the final edits, so pretty soon it's coming.
Wow, great. I kind of had a little knowledge about that happening, Bruce. It's really great to hear you say that. In part, I'm gonna check with Jen and Brian to see if we can actually have a little bit of time for you to present it to the other commissioners here as well, so that we can all kind of get a prize as to the surveys and the assessments you're doing along these north-south East Portland streets. That would be really helpful, I know, for me. And I think as we think about East Portland and the rapid changes that are happening in that part of the city, it'll be great to kind of get all the information on the table so that we can, advise the city as we're expected to do. So that's great. Thanks, Bruce. All right. So we are at time here, 10 o'clock. I'd like to, well, Director Uchiyama, I think we're expecting Dawn as well. So just as for Dawn arrives, I'd like to welcome Adina. Thanks for joining us. This is a big moment for kind of bringing together conversations that we've been having in the Urban Forestry Commission for some time, and looking for, I know we've had a lot of questions from commissioners, and so this is a great time to get clarification and kind of recognition of an ongoing series of questions about tree planting, bureaus, responsibilities. So, and thanks, Brian, for sending that out. I didn't have, admittedly, a lot of time to look at it, so I gave it as quick and or as thorough of a read as I could, though there's probably lots of elements in it. And love to know from you, Adina, if there's specific kinds of feedback you're looking for, if there's any feedback at all, or if you're presenting this as an FYI, or kind of how you want the commission to kind of situate themselves within this conversation about the tree planting MOU.
Yeah, so we were going to go through, do some introductions, because I think we've got because Chenoweth is also here from DES, and I don't think many of you have gotten to meet her. So we were hoping to do a round of introductions. I just pinged Dawn to see if she was on her way. She has some introductory remarks she would like to give as well. So I want to make sure she's got the Zoom. She's currently a participant and needs to be made a panelist. Thank you.
Okay. And welcome, Chenoweth. It's great to see you again. I know we chatted back in June, I think, when you were coming on board and just getting familiar with stuff. So it's great to see you again. And welcome, Dawn. It's great to see you again, of course. And I looking forward to the conversation. Sounded like we were going to go through the tree planting MOU is the primary agenda item today, and kind of open it up for any questions that come up. If you'd like, we can hold questions off to the end, or if there's clarifications during during your remarks, we can do that as well. But I might suggest that commissioners, if there are questions that come up, to put that in the chat for the host and attendees, and then we can revisit that after directors Long and Uchiyama have a chance to kind of give us the lowdown on this process and the outcome.
Great. But like I said, Director Uchiyama will sort of kick us off to introduce all of us. And Chenna is going to give us some background on the MOA or MOU, excuse me. And then Angie's going to talk a little bit about details of the agreement. And then I'll just talk about sort of our next steps. And I think, you know, the commission may or may not have had an opportunity to read the MOU in its entirety. So that's why we want to sort of have a detailed conversation about it. So
Wonderful, super helpful. Thanks. Chenna,
Dawn, passing the mic to my colleague, Dawn.
Thank you, Dina. Really appreciate it. My heart is pounding a little bit. I joined with the public link and I didn't realize, anyway, someone's smoothly transitioned me over to a place where I could actually speak. So thank you for that. A little panic there. I am so happy to be here this morning, and thank you, Vivek, for framing this for us and for all the work that has gone into this. I am just so excited to be here. And to kick off this conversation, we have been through some rough patches, right? And we have learned a lot, and we're getting on track, and we have, I think, some really exciting news to share today. So I just am so happy to be here, given all the things that we've been through the last couple of years. So I first want to take a moment by acknowledging the need, the incredible need we have for this.
Uh-oh.
Sounds like she might have unplugged like a docking station, just that sound that I heard.
Yes. Sounds, yeah, right. Okay, so we've got, well,
I think I see Adina texting Dawn to let her know.
okay.
But apparently I can't spell.
All right. Well, I don't know how long this is gonna be. If it was simple, logging off and logging back in. So Brian, you might want to keep an eye out for transition here. Give another couple of seconds, minute, maybe there we go. You're back.
I'm back.
Okay.
I am, today's the day that I will suffer from multiple technology problems. Unbelievable.
Oh, we've got you. We can hear you. So
Okay, you can hear me, and it's amazing because I have to log back in while I'm talking. And anyway, so again, apologies for the bumpy start, but I want to say that taking this moment to acknowledge the incredible need for the work that we are all doing in this space, and that we we all have a contribution to make in preserving our city's tree canopy. And this work has always been important. Portland has an amazing history, but we know that it's more important than ever. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves that Portland has experienced some really widespread and sometimes fatal impacts of the climate changes. And we know that the most severe experiences are with people who are living in low canopy areas, and that a disproportionate number of community members in low canopy areas are also low income and people of color. So this has been a background condition. It's been something that's been brewing. It's been important. It's been on our radar. But we know now more than ever how important it is. And so I think, what I really want to emphasize today is how excited I am to be here with Adina and with Parks and BES staff and all of you on the commission. And that we know we have a responsibility to continually improve the services that we provide, tree planting services that we provide, and that we have to ensure that we deliver them in a manner that is responsive to all of the community needs. And this conversation today is a kickoff of understanding and acknowledging that both Parks and BES take that responsibility very, very seriously. And that we're ready for the next generation of work in this space with all of you. So again, apologies for the bumpy entry, but I hope that you can hear in my voice the passion and commitment and the energy that goes into the work ahead. So thank you very, very much. And I will turn it over to, I believe, Chenoweth now to get into some of the detail.
Thank you so much. And I just want to, first of all, echo John's gratitude because I am also just so grateful to be here. So thank you so much to Urban Forestry Leadership, Jen Cairo and Angie DeSalvo, and to Brian Lando, who runs the agenda, and Dr. Vic Shandas, the chair, and to every member here. This is just very exciting for me. So I just wanted to put that out there first. And then also, I recognize a few faces from my work in the community prior to coming to the city, which is really nice to have those friendly faces, but I will definitely want to start by introducing myself. So I've been with the city for 18 months, and my name is Chinoa Philibon, she, her pronouns, and I work at the Bureau of Environmental Services, and I am the Community Partnerships Division Manager. So I oversee teams at the Bureau that deliver programs to people and to organizations in our community, and the programs contribute to the mission of BES and to the regulatory requirements, which include various permitting and regulatory things such as the MS4. So my division delivers financial investment, collaborative stewardship, environmental education, and green infrastructure facilities, which was what brings me here today. So we do that all through partnerships in the community. And one of those delivery programs is the Environmental Services Tree Program. So I'm here today to provide a little bit of context, which I think is appropriate because context is definitely something that was extremely helpful in my onboarding. And even though I've been here for a year and a half, I still feel like I'm getting a little bit of context every day. So that really helps. And several of you in this room helped me out. So I just really greatly appreciate all of you for that. So we could, as with any journey, I think you can begin in multiple starting points. So we're going to begin in 2019 when the late Commissioner Nick Fish oversaw both the Bureau of Environmental Services and Portland Parks and Recreation. And he kind of put together not a mandate, I don't think I'll say, but he really asked the bureaus to come together to collaborate on recommendations to provide for the overall tree canopy planting plan. And so in doing that, he was really asking both bureaus to come together to improve the planting of the city. And that would be, specifically defining roles and responsibilities for each bureau so that we could really successfully achieve tree canopy outcomes that were desired by truly everyone in the city and in both bureaus. And doing that all without conflict, without confusion. So that exploratory process began with an internal conversation, and that included senior staff, bureau directors, and also field staff from both of the bureaus and third-party consultants. So that conversation was pretty successful and yielded a few outcomes that included an MOU for natural planting areas. So that was one of the big wins. Also, what came out of that conversation was a need for a second conversation that really brought together a broader collection of stakeholders. And so that was hosted by Dr. Vivek Shandas and Dr. Jennifer Allen from Portland State University and multiple stakeholders for tree canopy throughout the community. So, and there's a report on that, and that was incredibly helpful. And that was also something that, I wanted to speak to the stakeholders that were there to really learn, because that is definitely something that is incredibly important for us to center in any collaborative conversations that we have. So I'm actually going to read you the outcome statements that folks wanted the city to commit to, just so that I don't, interpret them in any way. So I'll just read those to you. And then I just want you to know those are the statements that we want to center in any collaboration that we do. So those statements are: improve outcomes for BIPOC Portlanders and low-income, low-canopy neighborhoods; align city tree planting programs to integrate outreach, engagement, policy, planning, planting, stewardship efforts, and tree life cycle management; invest new resources in engagement to ensure tree planting activities match needs and values of the community. Make it seamless for community partners to work with the city by clarifying Bureau roles and responsibilities, business processes, funding, etc. Set goals with community involvement, measuring and reporting progress. And so this MOU that we're bringing to you today is, I would say, a celebratory moment. I would also say that it's a first step towards centering those statements. And although she's not here today, I do want to just publicly say that my division is housed within a group, and that group was led by Marvita Redding. And truly, she has retired as of last week, but her contributions to these conversations were just incredible and really helped to foster and bring us here. So even after 30 years of retiring, I just want to let her know, out in the ether, that we're thinking of you, and this, even though you can't be here today, this really is exciting, I think, for us and for her and her work. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Angie, who will share some of the details of the MOU after this background.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Chenoa. That was really well done, and is super helpful for me to hear. Those of you, I think everyone knows me, but in case you don't, I'm Angie DeSalvo, and I work for Urban Forestry, and I manage our science outreach and planting programs. And I've been with Parks for a while now, and so I'm going to give you the details in the agreement, which you have seen, and I'll just run through them. I know I want to save a lot of time for Q&A. So the MOU for citywide tree planting accomplishes a series of things. The first is that it really recognizes the roles and responsibilities of the two bureaus, and those are laid out and clear for us both to see. And probably the big question is, so what does it mean about who's doing what? So it establishes very clear priorities for the two different bureaus as it relates to tree planting. And the purpose of this is to really help eliminate any programmatic overlap. We want to improve outcomes, and we're really trying to provide greater clarity for the community. So when they ask, where do I go for X, Y, or Z type of planting, we're able to point them in the right direction. So Bureau of Environmental Services will prioritize planting private trees on commercial, industrial, and multifamily properties. And Parks will plant trees in parks, along streets citywide, at schools, and on residential properties. So those are the primary focus areas where each of us will be working. The MOU also sets some shared planting standards and outcomes that we all agree upon, and those will be pursued through our programs. So that means prioritizing tree planting that maximizes canopy growth. So we want to prioritize those evergreen trees, native species. We want resilience to climate change, as well as pests and pathogens, any other threats that are coming along to the urban forest. It also sets the expectation that both of our bureaus are going to publicly report to each other and figure out a way to report on the number, the location, the species. We want to be transparent and provide information on the work that we're doing. And so we will continue to do that. And then it gives a framework for the next steps. So how are we going to continue to collaborate and work together now that we've clearly defined our work areas? And so Chenoa and I, as program managers, will continue to meet monthly. And there will be a couple of tasks we're going to work on in the coming years. One is to conduct a joint communication to promote tree planting opportunities from the perspective of the city. So not just individually promoting by bureau, but we will have a citywide communication that talks about available planting opportunities. We're also going to look at a shared RFP for some of our planting contracts. So knowing that there is a fair amount of overlap in some of those contractors, we should be working off of the same standards, requirements, pricing, et cetera. And so we're going to begin exploring that this year. And then we're also going to identify how our programs are going to better promote community building as well as workforce development opportunities. That's been a really high need for both of our bureaus to get this work done. And so that will be a piece that we work on together. And then the way that we're going to accomplish that collaboration is we are going to continue to meet monthly. The MOU is good for 2 years. So over that period, we'll be able to assess and then review and revise the terms because things are constantly changing. It's a very exciting time for tree planting and urban forestry nationwide. And so it gives us an initial time period to work off of. Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to Adina. She's going to tell you next steps and going forward.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you, Chenoa, and thank you, Commission, for having us. As you can tell, we've really made some great progress over the last couple of years, but of course, there's still a lot of work to be done. Together, our two programs planted 4,600 trees during this past planting season, and we'll plant an estimated 5,000 for this upcoming season. And of course, as I'm sure you're aware, BS and parks also plant thousands of trees in natural areas. So, this agreement helps to ensure that these trees and future trees will be planted in accordance with both industry best practices and will also fulfill our established city goals and policies, as well as those needs that have been defined for the community. So we're really excited about the work. I know it may feel like a long time in coming, but all good things in time. I also want to note that today, Commissioner Carmen Rubio will be announcing proposed changes to strengthen and streamline the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which includes an anticipated $40 million investment over 5 years to grow and maintain our community's urban forests. So we're really excited about that. This MOU between BES and parks will help provide a framework that can support implementation of these new resources. And we're really excited to help the community respond to climate change locally by being efficient and effective as we plant and care for as many trees as we can. There will be a press release highlighting the details that will be shared with the community at noon today. And we'll make sure to send the press release directly to the commission at that time. So I'm always happy to end on a high note, but I know that we have some time for Q&A, so I'll pass it back to the back.
All right, thanks for that summary. Very exciting indeed. So let me go around the room, so to speak, with commissioners. And if you don't have a question, don't have a comment, that's fine, just pass. But I'd love to kind of get everyone, since this is pretty significant development, love to have all the commissioners at least do a round robin and yeah, see if you have any questions. Start with Adrian, since your hand is up. Maybe we'll go alphabetical. Thanks, Adrian. You made this easy. I'll go alphabetical. First name alphabetical.
Good. Yeah, this is really great and exciting work. Congratulations. I know it's been a long time coming, much needed. So a couple of questions, clarification. So one thought, I'm wondering if you've thought about putting out a joint report annually on impact. Just because, you know, when we've had a couple of divisions that maybe haven't worked together ideally in the past and trying to get to the same aim, you know, I think it would really improve sort of the public's outlook on it. And I'm sure, you know, City Council would be very interested in it. So for example, we're trying to grow canopy, and what is the net effect of the work in this partnership? So that was one thought. And then the other is more of a question clarification. So what is applications for development going to look like? Is that going to stay the same? Yeah, how does it work? How does the overlap work now? Since we're suspicious, you know, that's a big part of the loss. Yeah, leave it at that.
So I can answer the reporting question. We do report citywide on tree planting outcomes every year, and it does include BES planting. So that is existing in us reporting our information. We will continue to compile that into a citywide report that will be publicly available. So thank you for making sure that we do that. That's very important. And in terms of the applications for development, I think it's probably a little bit outside of this conversation. Here we're talking about inputs and what we're calling voluntary planting inputs into the system, whereas preservation is another component, but it should remain unchanged, right, Jen? Did I capture that?
Yeah, and I'll elaborate on that. And I've wondered if this would be a confusing point, Adrian, for some folks, but let Angie use the term voluntary, so I'll keep using that. This is this agreement and the work between the two bureaus is really just about the planting that we're doing outside of tree code requirements. And when it comes to property development, the tree code is the place that defines what needs to happen, what's required to happen there. And so as we look again in the future at Title 11 amendments, that's really the place to be looking at development impacts on tree canopy in terms of retention and required plantings.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Well, can we go to Bruce? Bruce?
I would like to see financial information about what money is being spent on tree planting broken down by the programs on an annual basis. I think it's really important for the taxpayers to be aware of how the funds are being used, how much is involved, and ideally I would like to know that funding that's been spent in the last 10 years for tree planting. Because again, everybody can support tree planting, but not everybody is necessarily going to support increasing the taxes that we have to pay. So we need to know, what are we spending? We know what we're getting for the money, but we want to know how much money is and the source of the funding. Is it general fund dollars? Is it levy funds? Where's the money coming from? Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Daniel, Jen, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, just thank you for that comment, Bruce. And just as a reminder to commissioners, Urban Forestry reports each year in a written report on how we use our trust funds. One of those is the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. And that is the bulk of the funding that we have right now for tree planting. So that's just a reminder. It'll come back to you. They're all on the website. We report on that to council. That said, thanks for the comment, Bruce. Understood.
Okay. Daniel, anything from you?
Sure. Have a comment and a question, but first just want to say thank you to people from both bureaus for coming and presenting, and congratulations on this accomplishment. I think it's really helpful to have a public MOU that people can see. So because we've all been wondering for so long what's been going on, this is really nice to have this so that we can actually see it. I noticed in the language in the MOU, I know it's already been signed, it's too late to change anything, but it said it's all about tree planting, and it would be helpful, I think, also somewhere to talk about, once the trees go in the ground, who's responsible after that? Because as we know, tree planting is just a small piece of making sure the urban forest grows. So somewhere, probably not in this memo, but somewhere it would be helpful to have that laid out too. And my question is, after having, and I know this gets into some big questions. I know people have talked a lot about Friends of Trees contracts and that kind of thing. But setting aside any specific organization, I am wondering if the city has a policy at this point or something you'd like to say publicly about whether or not you're going to be doing the tree planting with contractors versus city employees, if that's something you can say publicly. And the reason I ask is because during the research that I've done around the country, it shows that tree planting and tree care can be up to 4 times as expensive if you do it with city employees as opposed to doing it with contractors. So I'm wondering if you have a comment on that.
Do you want me to cover that, Jen? Sure. So Thanks, Daniel. That's very insightful. We actually use a combination of ways of getting trees planted. So we do have internal operations crews who focus on planting in our parks, as well as a handful of other bureaus. However, the bulk of the work that we are doing is contract planting, and that is how we intend to proceed at this stage. However, there's also, how that gets defined. We're still looking at best ways to involve community members and organizations. And I think bringing in PSEF funding for that is going to help. There's a lot still to be determined to come, but the current setup for us is we do some planting internally, a fairly small amount compared to a lot of contract planting. And then we also do voluntary or work with volunteers to do planting. And then a large, for parks at least, a large portion of work is actually done by property owners with our yard tree giveaway. So it's a mix.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. I'll just add to that. Angie kind of started here, but really we're working at using whatever techniques, any and all techniques and folks that are effective. It is important for us, of course, to be efficient as a dedicated public servant. I know I want our funds to be well spent, so I really appreciate Bruce's questions and comments too. And in that regard, as well as what are the forest outcomes that we get, we're always looking for the best way to do it, which is why, as Angie described, we kind of have an array of ways and folks with whom trees get planted. The city staff part is quite small. Of course, there's always a city staff component managing, coordinating, and overseeing all the work that's done, including by the contractors.
Right.
Right. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Angie. Thanks, Jen. Ivory, any questions or comments, feedback?
Just a comment. Thank you all for coming to present, and like Daniel said, it's nice to have this MOU laid out so we can clearly see what the bureaus are doing. So just thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ivory. Leah?
Yeah, I want to echo what Daniel said about the importance of not just the planting, but what happens. We know a lot of trees don't make it if they're not cared for. And we have that looming issue of trying to help homeowners with the costs of maintenance and all of that. So keeping that in the forefront. But I think it's great that this work is being done before all these funds are coming our way to do the tree planting. It's really important that this groundwork is laid first. So I appreciate that. And I'm definitely excited about that.
Thanks, Leah. Megan.
This, I do have a couple of questions and or comments. So one thing, Chenoa, you commented on how context is important. And if I am understanding this MOU correctly, it does seem like from maybe where we were 5 years ago in the city, it is a significant change to how the city is going to approach tree planting and how BES is going to approach tree planting. So I do hope that when sharing this with the community, if I am understanding this MOU correctly, that change in context is being shared. BES historically had a residential tree planting program. And from my understanding of this MOU, it is going to be very different moving forward. And it seems like what this MOU is saying is that tree planting moving forward with residential properties will be, you can go and get a free tree from urban forestry, or you can potentially get a tree through opt-out planting if your neighborhood is one of the identifiable neighborhoods. That seems, am I understanding that correctly in terms of how that's being presented in terms of the city's approach via this MOU?
I can take a stab at that, Megan. I think you're reading some details into the MOU that aren't actually written there entirely. It's meant to be fairly broad about the types of areas where the two groups will focus. At present, yes, those are the programs, some of the programs that urban forestry is doing. Our anticipation, though, is, as I commented earlier, most of our funding right now is from the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. And as we've said in the past, as more funding comes online, we'll be continuing to expand and grow planting opportunities, programs, partnerships. That is an active part of our plans. And so it will be more than what we're doing now, and in different ways than what we're doing now. And again, going back to my earlier comments, we're really focused on outcomes and what's efficient and effective for the community's goals and the stated goals of the city, and our climate and equity needs. And those will be the guiding principles to determine what's the best way to get it done, whether it's giveaways or plantings in certain areas and those sorts of things, rather than being defined by the planting mechanism. It's really more focused on outcomes. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think that context is helpful because, and hopefully can be made clear, because every time we come, I think we get told how urban forestry is currently doing planting. So that is the context that we have for this. So to understand there's more nuanced context, one thing I would just share as a comment that I would hope for is, I know that there was a comment about, like reducing redundancies within this. And one thing I believe strongly is if you want a resilient urban forest, like a resilient ecosystem, you need more options, right? Like one option, a yard tree giveaway may work for one person, but not somebody else. So a resilient urban forestry, we need more options, not less. We're in the middle of a climate crisis. So I think all I have to operate on is the historical context. So I really hope that this context is made clear, because right now we kind of know what has happened previously, and I don't know if this document allows me to fully understand what is going to happen. So I would appreciate clarity within that as we move forward.
Great, thanks, Megan. I couldn't agree more. And as I said, that is our intention, to build in many different directions. And the redundancy isn't really about the type of planting or that sort of thing. It's really about what are the roles between the two groups. That was really at point there. And I'll comment also that the programs you mentioned now, really Parks has built those within the past handful of years, because prior to really 2016, 2017, there were no funds available to urban forestry for tree planting. That all came about with the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. So if it's any help, the programs we have now have been built based on the principles I mentioned before, and really rapidly. And I think you can expect to see that kind of activity going forward when funds become available.
Thank you, Megan. Roberta, just to come around the corner.
Thanks. I want to echo all the appreciation for the work that's been done, and it's exciting. Feels in a way like an old chapter, but a new chapter. To just elaborate on a couple points, I guess, variations on a theme. I would love to see, I was a little surprised to not see in the standards and outcomes a reference to kind of the maintenance issue, establishment, health, maintenance, longevity of the trees. I was, it struck me again reading this, that the city's investing not only in trees on public property and rights of way, but also on private property. We continue to invest in creating more assets on private property. And I'm curious about kind of what the strategy is. A lot of us are continuing to work on getting the city to look at options for maintaining street trees, but really, a lot of the urban forest is going to continue to be on private property. So how BES is working to establish standards and outcomes for maintenance longevity of those trees would be a helpful thing for people to know, in sort of the asset management strategy for both private and public trees. And then also to echo, I think, we continue to get questions from people who believe there should be a lot more trees going in the ground than has been projected. There's a lot of money coming on with PCF funds, and I think it would be great to put together some sort of strategy around messaging to the public around how the city intends to build capacity. It relates to that community building piece of the MOU that's in here and that Angie talked about. But it's how we kind of staff up and community up and everything to get to work with these funds in an efficient and expeditious way that responds to the urgency of the climate situation and people's concern about that. I think some more public reaching out and speaking out about how you intend to do that will be helpful to you and helpful to us as we get inquiries from the public every meeting and so forth. So looking forward to hearing more about that as it rolls out.
Thanks, Roberta. Your hand up. Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Vivek. Roberta, thank you for those comments. I couldn't agree with you more. I just want to note that I think we all recognize the tree establishment and ongoing maintenance is, of paramount importance for us to grow and maintain the urban forest. But I just want to remember that the MOU is about the relationship between urban forestry and BS community partnerships and how we do this work together. And it's less about how we operationalize the work, but that it will continue to be a part of the conversation. We didn't want to get so into the weeds, pun intended, about what that efficient and effective work looks like, but that conversation will continue, certainly. And with regards to PSEF, it's very new information, although I think we all knew it was brewing, and there will probably be a lot of internal conversation, and we'll work very closely with BPS and PSEF to make sure that we're being transparent and engaging with the community and reporting back to the commission and others about how this is going to roll out, because it's a huge amount of resources and there's a huge amount of need. But we're really excited. Like literally, I got news today that I can tell you guys about it. So thank you for that.
Okay. Adrian, we're out of time, but just a quick circle back to you. Can you make it quick?
Whoops, sorry, it's probably not quick, but maybe I'll just throw it out there. So yeah, so I've noted that for urban forestry that the majority of the tree planting budget is essentially from fines. And wondering if BES is the same, and maybe it's an agenda item for another time. I wonder if that's, there's some perverse incentives set up, and what the long-term outlook is for that, if there are other cities or places that do it another way.
Yeah, we can come back to that for sure. There's a lot of
Great, thanks.
FYI type things. And with the letter V, I will wrap this up, at least set of questions as last of this list. I'm just thrilled at the agreements and the excitement. It's palpable of what had to happen for us to get to this point. Really, really amazing momentum. And my comment might just simply be that, if we're really thinking that a new urban forestry management plan, as well as some substantive changes to Title 11 are going to be in the near future, my hope is that this momentum kind of builds on that and clears the path for the kinds of questions and the kind of deeper visioning and values that are going to emerge as a result of, I hope, this revised urban forestry management plan and the code that follows. So if there's anything else that might, and this is just kind of a general comment, but if there are any other, I'm not thinking of anything specific, but if there are any other things that might hang up the likelihood of having those deeper, more value-based conversations as we think about the urban forestry management plan, it'd be great to get these MOUs and any other mechanism that's possible to clear the way for making that a really, really prospective and progressive project in the coming years. So that's just my comment. It's great to have this kind of part of that clearing the way of what it means to really go into the urban forestry management plan with kind of all hands on deck, with any residual issues taken care of, so that we can really springboard into this next chapter. I think as Roberta was saying, for this work. So that's my comment. Congratulations on getting this signed. Really grateful for your time coming to the commission as directors of bureaus and working with the volunteer group here. And really appreciate you coming in and giving us the lowdown. We'll certainly be following up with staff and others on the operationalization and other details that you heard today. So thank you again. Really appreciate your time. Looking forward to keeping in touch. All right. And I'd love to move on to a little bit late, but I'd love to move on to the Bill Nato Awards, which is a wonderful time where we get to recognize people and organizations in the community who have been real champions for this work. And I'll turn it over to Claire, who I think is going to be leading this conversation. Claire, apologies for running a little late today. Hope we can get through the agenda that you have set up for us.
Thanks so much, and no worries. I think it's my 4th year now running the Bill Nato nominations. I think it's just on track for every year. We get a little bit delayed, so I'm used to it by now. All good. So you guys all received a packet of information for who the nominations are this year. For those folks who are new to UFC this year around, we do have an award that goes out to both a community group, so a volunteer group, and then a volunteer individual who have done really stellar work in our community. They've shown all of the really important things that we work for within urban forestry, but also what we hope that our community is also caring for. So we know that there's a lot of tree lovers in Portland, and how can you pick out just 1 or 2 a year to really give that applause to? And as you guys have in that packet there, we go all the way back to 1997 when the award first started. So we have about 25 years worth of folks who have created this really long legacy of dedication to our urban forest. And we just look forward to keep recognizing those folks each time and each year. So this year you have, you're gonna be voting on an individual recipient and then a group recipient. And we have 3 nominations for each of those. So you guys can have discussion if you want to internally. I just, by the end of the time here, need those decided on who each of those recipients is going to be. And I will also add in that those awards, those will be given out to those recipients at our Arbor Day celebration, which is going to be on the 29th of October. So the last Saturday of the year. You guys will probably get a more formal invite in your emails from Brian and Ashley, but I just wanted to let you guys know if you want to be there or be present or help support the delivery of these awards to those people who do receive them at the end. Feel free to reach out to me and let me know. I think there's a question there. I don't know if this is relevant to this. An audible roll call. I think that's up to, I think we have in the past, because last year we also voted, the last 2 years we voted remotely. I think I've only done 1 year in person. So I believe that you guys do the whole figuring that side out.
That sounds fine.
Awesome. Do you want me to run through just naming off who each of those groups are? Okay.
Sure, that'd be great.
I'm going to just kind of like run through very briefly. I don't want to give too much of my personal opinion because with urban forestry, am the volunteer manager. So some of these people I have worked with personally, some of them I have not. So I will be obviously more biased towards those I've spent past couple 3.5 years with more intimately. So I'm going to try to keep my my personal opinions out of it and leave it for you guys to really be able to take this on from what was provided to you. So for our individual nominations, our first one is going to be Ginger Edwards. She has been the pretty much the lead of the North Portland Tree Coalition and the Arbor Lodge Tree Team, keeping them up and running and doing amazing and consistent work throughout the year. I know she's pulled Vivek into some tree walks in the area, doing different talks, and this coming Saturday, they're going to be having some informational stuff at their Jazz Festival in Arbor Lodge Park. So they never stop running, and my little personal side, I really appreciated that the tree team actually wrote this nomination, so you can really hear their voices through the words that they put together for you guys to read. The other 2 individuals, one of them you guys know actually both you guys should know pretty well if you're familiar with urban forestry. One is Casey Clapp, who is a community educator and holds a podcast called Completely Arbitrary, which is worth a listen, I would say, and really fills a niche of tree podcasts in pretty much the entire podcast world. So really interesting to listen to and reaching different audiences in different ways. And the last one we have for the individual is going to be Greg Everhart, which many of you may know from previously being an urban forestry commissioner and being very active with the Heritage Tree Committee. So they've been around for quite a while and really well involved with our UFC and with our urban forest. So you guys are gonna have a tough voting one on that one. I do not envy you. And then for our group nominations, we had some a little bit of a theme there, but we had a couple different folks who pulled out some interesting ones. So first we have the Friends of Mount Tabor Park Weed Warriors. So they're a group that specifically gets together to pull mostly English ivy off of the trees at Mount Tabor Park to help ensure that they have a good, long, healthy urban forest and good, healthy trees for the longevity of that really valuable space in our community. The second one, very similar, is going to be No Ivy League. Those are two different programs. The Weed Warriors is part of the Friends of Mount Tabor's group, and then the No Ivy League is underneath the Portland Parks land stewardship side of things. So they're a group of volunteers that have been working a long time to do regular events throughout the year and really get a lot of volunteers out to help care for those trees, primarily in those naturalized areas. And then our last one here is going to be Trees for Life Oregon. It keeps coming up. People have been trying to vote it in since they established, but they've been really focusing on the longevity of our urban forests, making sure that trees make it past that point of when we stop establishing those. So about 3 to 5 years, we kind of take our hands off and let it up to the homeowner. And this group has kind of filled in that gap there to make sure that people are educated that you need to keep watering your trees, you need to keep maintaining your trees, and even your mature trees can be stressed out, especially in our changing climate, and how to really be more adaptable. So all of these really combine different parts of both education, community engagement, stewardship, and volunteerism, and all are really representative of who Bill Nato was as the founder of the Urban Forestry Commission and a dedicated tree lover of Portland. So I will turn it over to Vivek to do the voting, and you guys have a tough decision to use. So I thank you guys for your work.
Yeah, thanks so much, Claire. A lot of work in doing this every year. Really appreciate your thoughtful and kind of coherent way of assembling all of this for us to review. Really, this and the Heritage Tree nominations, I have to say. I mean, I love talking about budgets, and I love talking about all the interactions with other bureaus, but these two are really some of the fun moments I'll remember over the years on the commission. So generally what we do, please keep these as positive, supportive comments about the nominees. And the idea here is to, if there's any kind of, any nominees that seem like they really rise to the top for you, please voice your opinion about them. And the goal here is to try to reconcile the individuals. And so I'm going to ask for a vote at the end of this. We have about 10 minutes for this. So really looking to be pretty efficient in our review of these potential candidates. Yeah. So anybody want to start? Should we just, I think I'll open it up just to a general conversation. I don't want to go around circle yet or square yet. So yeah, any thoughts, reactions to the individuals submitted? Or the organizations, of course.
I'm happy to share, Vivek. I mean, I think one thing we've talked about in the past is like the history of like involvement sometimes that someone has had.
Yeah.
So I do think about that with this. Of course, with both Greg and Ginger within it. And I feel like I would be remiss to not bring Greg's voice in this, where Greg would maybe give us some critical feedback on the fact that we're having this conversation at the commission and not more privately. I feel like we can't talk about Greg and that's her feedback had been sometimes it feels uncomfortable to talk about the people and then not select them in a public forum. So I just feel like if we're talking about Greg, I just have to bring forward the fact she would say that.
Yes, thank you.
But I think that both, I see that I know Casey as well. I know all of these people, but I feel like both the Greg and Ginger, their history is something we should think about. They've been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah. I'll note that Greg is continuing to serve on her Heritage Committee after her time on the commission as well. Other thoughts? Start with the individuals. I guess thanks, Megan, for leading us into that. Maybe start with the individuals and then we can go to the organizations just for a little bit of at least ease of conversation. Anybody want to lift? Anybody want any it's interesting. to try to reconcile these individuals in a public forum. I've not quite, I mean, we've done this in this way, but it is kind of an awkward situation to be in, I have to admit. Other thoughts, reactions? Anybody want to lift up anybody? Yeah, Bruce?
I think I'm inclined to nominate Ginger for the award. If we were giving two, I would nominate both Ginger and Greg, because they both have done good work and continue to do work and will into the future. So that's my nomination.
All right. I might just, yeah, I might just open it up here to see if there's other lifting up to be done for individuals. Yeah. Okay, Daniel.
Mine is a question, is a procedural question, Vivek.
Yeah.
So we nominate somebody and then vote yes, no. Do you say how many people vote for candidate A, how many for B, how many for C? How do we do that?
I think the way we've gone is 1, 2, and 3, and how many for candidate A, how many for candidate B, how many for candidate C. That's been, at least from the evidence that we have from any commissioners lifting up specific names, like that's what we're essentially going to be going on. And any, of course, knowledge we have about the work that they've done. And we get essentially one vote in that process. Roberta?
I just want to say this is really, really hard. This is my first one, and it's so wonderful and it's so difficult. This is just impossible for me. But I appreciate what Megan said about history, and I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about kind of breadth of, geographically and numbers of people reached. I was trying to figure out criteria, all that stuff. And then I think I just want to mention something that comes to my mind about Greg is, having worked myself for the city for a couple of decades, I would want folks to take that into account too. She not only was on the Urban Forestry Commission, and her work with the Heritage Program, but she worked for, I don't know how long, for the city of Portland Parks and Rec, and just over those years was very much a public servant for a long, long time around trees and other parks related pieces of the puzzle. So it was more, I'm still not sure how I'm going to go on voting, but it did strike me that maybe not everybody knows that about Greg Everhart. So that's what I want to point out.
Thanks, Roberta. Claire?
I just wanted to add in there that if like somebody has like paid experience, we don't try to qualify that into it. So even though they did work for Parks and Recreation, because it's paid work, it's not volunteer kind of based, it doesn't count towards that. So their time as the Heritage Tree Committee, their time as the Urban Forestry Commissioner is volunteer time. And so that's really what we're looking for, is that it's the volunteer award. So looking at people who give back their time outside of professional or paid time of theirs.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
All right. And we've gone, yeah, and so are we ready? If it's quiet, you all have your vote hands, virtual, or I think we're doing audible. So let's see. I'm trying to figure out how to do this here. It's always a year later. I forget how we did it like previous year. It's like I have to remember this stuff. Apologies for my own lack of smooth process here. So why don't we just go down the list then? We'll start with audible and virtual or real hand for Ginger Edwards. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Virtual. Well, so by audible, can you, someone was asking for audible. Roberta, was that you? No.
That was me. It's more for the minutes. It's difficult. The recording doesn't capture the virtual hand raised. And if someone's video is off, the recording doesn't show that as well. So when I go to review these later to write the minutes, it's sometimes difficult. Yeah.
Great. You don't need names. You just needed to know 5 folks for Ginger, and then go to Casey Clapp, number 2, virtual or physical hand. And then for Greg Everhart, so I see 0. And for Greg Everhart, hands up. Okay, I see 3. So it looks like Ginger Edwards, at least from our vote, it rises to the nominee, or the nominee for individual for the Nato award. And now let's move, unless there's any questions on that. So congratulations, Ginger Edwards. Move to the organization. Anything you want to say about that briefly? About the organizations, Claire?
Nothing specific. Kind of looking back at like when we talked about like the paid portion. So there would be some paid staff under the No Ivy League, but we're looking at the volunteers who go back over many years and dedicate their time.
Okay, Daniel?
I just have a question, and this could be for Claire or maybe Angie about No Ivy League. Is this the group that started this annual No Ivy Day that we have every October around the city?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. I just know because my organization, every year we join and we're part of that, and it's a really great thing. All over the city, people are pulling ivy in various locations, and so thanks for clarifying that.
Okay, clever name too. Bruce, and then Megan.
I need to abstain in this discussion because of a conflict of interest.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Appreciate that. Megan?
Sure, I just have a clarifying question, or maybe a recollection question. Was Trees for Life Oregon nominated last year specifically? Is that?
Yes, they were. We allow people to renominate. So if you want to do Greg next year, write me a thorough description so everybody's convinced of their dedication.
Yeah, and just for then context, has Friends of Mount Tabor Park Weed Warriors and or No Ivy League been nominated in the past, just to give everybody equal ballots if they've had multiple nominations?
I don't, I can only speak for like the last 3 or so years since I've been doing or 4 years since I've been doing the nominations. I think the Weed Warriors were nominated 2 years ago, I want to say. And No Ivy League has not been nominated before, as far as I know. It might have in the past, like before my time, but I'm not aware of it recently being a nominated one.
Okay, anybody want to lift any of these 3 organizations up? Leah?
I could just share, as someone who uses Mount Tabor Park all the time to recreate and walk, I'm really impressed with how much native habitat is restored there that used to be blackberries and ivy. I see a lot, like the change is really impressive. So I'm not necessarily advocating that they are our pick, but I just wanted to add, as someone who has seen that work and the fruits of that work, that it's really impressive what they've done.
Great, thanks, Leah. Anybody else? All right, you have what you need then, and we can go forward with a vote. Let's start just down the list. Friends of Mount Tabor Parkweed Warriors. Can I have a virtual hand or a physical hand, please? I see 1, 2 hands. Okay, thank you. Going to No Ivy League. Hands, virtual or physical? I see 1, 2, 3. Okay. And Trees for Life Oregon, virtual physical hands. 1, 2. All right. Like we have no Ivy League as a organizational nominee for the Bill Nato Award. Congratulations, No Ivy League and Ginger Edwards, the 2022 Nato awardees. Look forward to kind of rolling that out, Claire, and congratulating them, hopefully in person at the event that you'd identified. So thanks everyone. That was great. Thanks, Claire. All right. Let's move on to sustainable future. I think we're coming back to the conversation that we had a few months ago with an update. And Sarah, I think this is welcome to commission meeting again, and turn it over to you for kind of, I think this is primarily an update to what has happened since you last came here, talk about sustainable futures and where we're going, I guess. Is that right? And if you
That's
need
great.
if you want any feedback, specific feedback, please let us know, let commissioners know what might be helpful at this stage, or if this is an FYI, that's fine as well, but just kind of thinking about what your needs are at this point with this process from us would be great.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me, and great to see you all. So I'm Sarah Huggins. I'm the Bureau's Sustainable Future Program Manager here at Parks. And, based on direction that we received from our City Council in 2019, we are continuing to pursue additional funding options to really sustain and fulfill our service levels and avoid reducing or scaling back critical park services for our community to fit, with the resources we have today. So this work really includes planning for how we can support service levels to grow and maintain Portland's tree canopy, which provides critical clean air, reduced stormwater runoff, reduced heat, and supports our community being resilient and livable. And I joined at the tail end, but I understand you got some pretty good news this morning around funding for helping to grow our canopy. Director Long is very committed to providing City Council and voters with opportunities to fund the service levels they've told us they want to see. Referral of the voter-approved 5-year parks levy on the November 2020 ballot allowed the Bureau to avoid devastating service cuts and make progress on operating service levels, but it's a temporary funding solution, and it didn't solve all the Bureau's long-term ongoing financial needs. So that's really why we're continuing the work of looking at potential ballot initiatives. And so as Vivek said, I'm here today to give an update on that work we've been doing. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a slideshow. And if you could let me know if you are seeing it.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Looks good.
So today I wanted to really provide just a basic update on the Sustainable Future Program work to date, and our current funding position and our funding gaps. And then as time allows today, I'd love to get feedback on the funding option criteria that we've been looking at, and also see if you have suggestions for other funding options that we might consider. I'll flag that I'm also coming back to your October meeting, so you have some time between now and then to do some additional thinking as well. So we have a variety of service levels that we're working to deliver for the community. And broadly, service levels are how we set goals to meet park and recreation related community needs. So we have operating service levels, like what levels of maintenance our trees, natural areas, and parks receive, or the types of programs we provide. And we also have capital service levels, like how much tree canopy, where we have it, how many parks or natural areas we are responsible for. I'll share some examples of each. So operational service levels might include things like how many acres of natural area are treated annually for invasive species removal, or how often park trees receive proactive maintenance as opposed to just addressing emergencies, or how frequently each park is visited for maintenance, like trash pickup, restroom cleaning, or general park cleaning. And then capital service levels might include things like what are our goals for tree canopy? Where do we have it today? Are benefits of canopy equitably distributed? Or when it comes to things like parks, what kinds of parks experiences should people be able to access close to home? What condition should park assets be in? And we're capturing all of these service levels in our Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland strategic planning framework. I think you've gotten a presentation about that work previously, but it's really an ongoing cyclical and iterative process. This is sort of a representation of it here on the screen. And this is where service levels that we are identifying from a variety of planning efforts for the urban tree canopy, parks and natural areas, community centers, our operations, our infrastructure and assets, and more all really come together. And these service levels will continue to be informed by ongoing listening and learning, allowing us to learn and adapt to make sure our goals are reflective of community needs. In addition to being continually informed by listening and learning, it's also supporting our anti-racism work by illustrating disparities across the system in our service, and it'll inform how we spend money to reduce disparities, prioritize equity, and create tangible outcomes for the community. So Portlanders love their trees and their parks and recreation activities and services, but as we've previously shared with you, we're not presently funded at a level to fulfill service level goals. Again, whether it's operational, like caring for our trees, parks, and natural areas, or capital, like maintaining assets and continuing to build our system to address inequities. And we know that without additional resources, our ability to provide the services Portlanders have said they value will decline. So this is an animation that shows our system expansion by decade. And our Bureau has a history. I'll just share the darker gray area shows the city of Portland boundary at the time. And as properties were acquired in that decade, they are showing up as red. And so you can sort of see by decade how the system has grown. And our Bureau really has a history of using tax measures to support our work. So over the last 120 years, we've gone to the voters many times for operating levies and capital bonds. I'll just pause here. You can see in the 40s Forest Park showing up. Most recently, voters passed the 5-year operating levy in 2020, and voters also passed a $68 million bond measure in 2014 that replaced a 1994 bond that was retiring. So this continued support has really enabled the creation of the system that we have today. At our first ballot initiative task force meeting, we invited some staff from the Trust for Public Land to join us and share a little bit about the park funding from sort of a national perspective. And among their update, I'll share that we are unique in many ways, but we're not the only park and recreation system looking at how to appropriately resource our services through ballot measures. And in the Trust for Public Land's experience over the past 25 years, local governments that create funding using the budget process provide substantially less funding than those that create dedicated funding through additional ballot measures. Also, nationally since 1996, 76% of all parks and recreation funding measures have passed at the ballot. So I'll just give a little history here. In 2019, after trying for many years to deliver sustainable services without sufficient resources, the Bureau started the Sustainable Future Initiative to really strategically begin to align its resources and services. Some of the early steps included creating an alternative funding task force that met during the summer and fall of 2019. And Vivek, thank you for representing the Urban Forestry Commission on that task force. Then in November 2019, City Council held a Sustainable Future work session where City Council reviewed our financial and service level forecasts and discussed potential alternative funding options. And at that work session, we received support to pursue additional funding to really change course and get the Bureau on track to fulfill service levels. Specifically, City Council encouraged us to continue pursuing a variety of options, including income tax, a temporary levy, formation of a special district with pursuit of a change to state statute, allowing a city council to be the governing body of a parks district, capital bonds, and a food and beverage tax. So in early 2020, we were advancing work on a number of those options, but we were all impacted by COVID. And given some pretty immediate operating funding gaps as our community centers closed, the Bureau pulled a bond which could address capital maintenance needs and a temporary levy which could address operational needs, and also pulled the idea of both together on the same ballot. We also pulled the idea of having the city take on street tree maintenance, but that did not receive support in the polling we did. And when we included it as part of a prospective levy package, it actually dropped overall support below sort of 50% overall support. So with highest polling support for an operating levy on its own, which did include tree planting and proactive maintenance of park trees, but which didn't include general street tree maintenance, the city council referred that levy to the ballot and Portland voters approved it in November of 2020. So this fiscal year, just the one that just concluded, was the initial year for the 5-year parks levy. And we worked during the year to develop procedures and programs and partnerships to ensure successful delivery of parks levy funded services for the community. And we're pretty excited to share the parks levy, the very first parks levy annual report broadly this fall. And currently the draft of that is being reviewed by our Parks Levy Oversight Committee. And now as we're completing implementation of year 1 for the Parks Levy, we're really turning our attention more fully to the next steps to ensure that we can deliver services to the community that's supported by adequate funding. So this summer, Director Long convened a ballot initiative task force to help inform next steps towards a more financially sustainable future. And Daniel, thank you for stepping up and serving on that task force. So, it was a limited duration, limited scope advisory group for Director Long, really to review alternative funding options for the Bureau to support a financially sustainable park system, and then provide her with advice and consultation, which she will consider with Commissioner Rubio. It's one way that we're getting input, but it's not the only way. So we've had, and we'll continue to have broader conversations with the community, you and other parks advisory boards about our funding position and our funding needs as well. So this slide just kind of shared the outline of their 3 meetings. At their first meeting, we really focused on sharing our service levels, including service level inequities, our funding position, and the types of funding gaps we were looking to close. The second meeting, we shared information and gathered input about the criteria for a number of potential funding options. And then at our third and final meeting, which we held last night, we asked for input on next steps, given kind of folks' understanding of both the funding needs and the funding options. This slide shows the folks that participated on that ballot initiative task force. Again, thank you, Daniel, for representing the Urban Forestry Commission on that task force. But we had a variety of people, some members of the Parks Board, also the Parks Foundation, community partners, local businesses. So it was a great group. So Bureau-wide, to deliver critical services, we've really identified on stable revenues to fund 3 major service categories for our existing services. And we are continuing to explore what it would take for adding a new service of taking on street tree maintenance. So with operations, we're really looking at overall our equitable park and recreation program services and our routine daily maintenance of parks, natural areas, trees, and other facilities. With capital maintenance, we're looking at how to fund the maintenance and replacement of existing facilities to prevent things from failing, like replacements of roofs or a major repair of a play structure. With capital growth, we're looking at how we can continue to expand the capacity of the park system to meet the needs of a growing Portland and really address inequitable access to parks, natural areas, trees, and facilities. And then again, as I mentioned, we are also continuing to look at opportunities to advance the city taking on street tree maintenance. So I wanted to give you sort of an update of where we see our financial position here. We're really working towards achieving a sustained annual funding level. These are all in fiscal year 23, so today's dollars, of about $235 million annually for the whole Bureau. And that would be about $255 million if we looked citywide at adding new service of street tree maintenance. So that includes about $139 million to achieve the service levels that Portlanders are experiencing with the Parks Levy, including affordable access to programs, tree planting, proactive tree maintenance. And the Parks Levy, for context, is providing about 1/3 of the Bureau's operating funding needs that you see here. And fiscal year 26 would be the last year that Portland Parks would receive Parks levy revenues under the current 5-year term. So to support our urban canopy, the Parks levy, as part of the operating funding here, is supporting increased tree planting in priority neighborhoods. And it's also building out our system for proactive tree maintenance in parks, including getting 12 new positions approved and planning conversations on measuring the success of proactive tree maintenance. So without the parks levy, trees in parks, would continue to only receive emergency and reactive maintenance. And we really hadn't had previously the resources to do that proactive maintenance. So we're thrilled that that work's going to be underway. On capital maintenance, we currently receive from the general fund an ongoing commitment of just under $5 million annually, but we need about $55 million more annually to reach an industry good practice level and prevent asset closures. And that's based on the idea that we should be reinvesting each year about 3% of the replacement value of our built infrastructure. With capital growth, we actually have a robust system development charge program that has largely been funding our new acquisitions and parks developments. So we're continuing to assume that revenues will be coming in just over $30 million a year to support that. But with additional resources, we can make faster progress there. And again, to date, we have looked at the cost for the city to take on street tree maintenance citywide. And your team has worked with a consultant to put a great estimate together for that. That would be around $20 million annually, again, if done citywide. And in the future, we'll also be interested to see what resources it might look like, or it might take to look at a more targeted approach. So maybe taking on street tree maintenance more specifically in priority neighborhoods as opposed to citywide potentially. So in sort of present year, that capital maintenance is our biggest gap that we're looking to solve for. This bumps us out 5 years. This was 1 year post the levy. And what we really see here is that our operating need opens up again. So we're very focused on ensuring that we have either a plan for renewal of the levy so that we can maintain our service levels, or a replacement resource for that parks levy. This is really that same information, just in chart instead of table form. So solid colors here indicate the funding that we would have, and dashed colors indicate the magnitude of our funding gap across the various categories. So being mindful of really what we're looking to solve for, I want to share a bit about some of the funding options that we also talked about with our ballot initiative task force. We grouped them into 3 general categories. So fees and other sources, then property taxes, and then other types of specific taxes. Generally, fees are something we would collect in exchange for a service being conferred, like a fee for a class or a permit, or in the case of system development charges, development impacts. But really, fees are intended to kind of recoup the cost incurred while providing a service to whoever is paying the fee. But in contrast, taxes are generally levied more broadly for the purpose of raising revenues for more general public benefits. So examples might be, property taxes, arts tax, or business income tax. So we definitely looked at a number of fees and other non-tax revenues, some of which we've used before, others which would be new. And these are all definitely tools we would want to continue pursuing and using, but on their own aren't ones that we see being able to fill largely, the funding gaps that we're looking to fill. I will flag here, the third one down, I think the park utility fee. There are some of these that we think could be more appropriate for something targeted like street tree maintenance. So, it might not be appropriate to fill kind of our entire operating needs, but I think street tree maintenance, especially, is a category that has potentially more opportunity and more funding options. So that's one I will flag here. So we're definitely going to continue pursuing all of those, but those on their own aren't going to get us where we need to go. So we are also looking at taxes. I want to spend a little bit of time here sharing some of the criteria that we could consider and that we talked about with the ballot initiative task force. And definitely as time allows today, I'd be interested to hear if you have other criteria that you think we should be also considering as this conversation moves forward. I'll just briefly go over. So allowable use is, for example, could it be used for operating expenses or capital maintenance, capital growth, street tree maintenance, or all categories? The duration looking really, is it a, kind of a permanent ongoing funding source? Is it temporary, like our 5-year levy, or maybe a one-time funding source? With funding potential, we looked at, how much annual revenue we think it could raise. And generally, I categorize those as things with high revenue potential being able to raise more than $15 million annually. We also looked at who pays, so individuals, businesses, certain types of businesses. And we also, will continue to have conversations around whether something might be more regressive, which means like people with less means might be paying a higher percentage of the overall tax, not necessarily a higher overall amount, but a higher percentage relative to their means, or more progressive. So those with the highest means are paying higher percentages. A couple of the ones we looked at involved compression. So that means that other jurisdictions could lose revenues. And so we also indicated kind of about how much that would be and where that comes into play. We also looked at sort of what level of approval would be needed to move that funding option forward. With ease of collection, in some cases, we already have ways to collect, to collect different taxes, and in other cases, we don't have a way. So we would, need to develop a plan for how to actually collect revenues. We also looked at growth rate. So we looked at other jurisdictions that had used these and generally tried to use their data to get a sense of how these might grow over time. Similarly, using data from other jurisdictions, we looked at volatility. So we wanted to see how much it might change in any given year. And we generally categorize things with higher volatility with more than kind of a 5% deviation. COVID definitely came into play for a number of the ones we looked at. And in some cases, there were some other considerations that we had as well. So I wanted to just share I'll sort of end here, share the list of taxes that we talked about with the ballot initiative task force and ask them to give input on. So on the property tax side, we are definitely looking at general obligation bonds. Those could pay for capital, but not operating. We can, continue to look at temporary local option levies. So we could look at a renewal option for the current levy. We're also looking at a special district, which is a little bit unique of everything on this list in that it would both be the option for a permanent rate. So kind of like our levy, but instead of something that would be renewed periodically, it could be a permanent rate. But it also is a change in governance structure. So one thing that Commissioner Fish at the time really encouraged us to do was to pursue a change in state statute that would allow a city council to be the governing body for a created park district if the district was within the city boundary. That is not allowed in current Oregon state statute for parks and recreation districts. They would need to be governed by sort of either an independent body, an elected independent body, or if they had the same boundaries, or if their boundary was entirely within a county, they could be governed by a county commission. Washington was like Oregon, but about 20 years ago, they changed their statutes to allow for a city council to become a governing body. And then Seattle actually used that to create a Seattle Park District that has the Seattle City Council as their governing body. So Commissioner Fish really encouraged us to pursue a change to the Oregon statute to make a special district a more viable option for Portland to consider. Under sort of non-property taxes, we are continuing to look at an increase in the city's transient lodging tax. That one doesn't have huge revenue potential, and there are some restrictions on sort of how it can be spent. It needs to have a tourism, part of it needs to have a tourism component. We also looked at the city implementing a cell phone tax. Both of those two are ones that in 2019, City Council wasn't supportive of us continuing to look at further. We are continuing to also look at a prepared food and beverage tax. That one has significant revenue potential, higher than $15 million a year. And there are other jurisdictions in Oregon that have successfully used that. Council encouraged us to consider an income tax. In particular here, we looked at a high earner income tax. And again, that one has very high revenue potential for Portland Parks. We also looked at an amusement tax. There's only 2 places in the US that have them, and only one that broadened their interpretation to include digital amusement, which is Chicago. But this one, again, very high revenue potential for Portland Parks if we were to look at it. I'm sure there would be heavy opposition, but so far Chicago has prevailed in the courts against Netflix and Apple and all of the corporations that came after them. We also looked at a payroll tax and the possibilities there. Again, very high revenue potential. We also did look at capital gains, and that one had higher than $15 million, but not as high as some of the others that we looked at here. We looked at a sweetened beverage, which is sometimes called a soda tax. Other jurisdictions have implemented that, several on the West Coast. That one's a little bit interesting because it's also a type of tax that is intended to, in part, curb the behavior. So, for example, when Berkeley passed it, their sales of sugary beverages went down 10% in the first year that was implemented. So it tends, in other jurisdictions, it looks like it generally has kind of a negative revenue trend, and that's because they're seeing the positive impact of less sugary beverages being sold. And we also were interested in the real estate excise tax. Seattle's Park District gets about 16% of their funding from a real estate excise tax. But as it all turns out, sadly, we are preempted not only in the statutes, but in the state constitution as well from pursuing a real estate excise tax. So these are some of the taxes that we talked about with our ballot initiative task force, and Director Long got a lot of great input yesterday in their final meeting on sort of where they thought these might land in terms of near term, longer term, or less viable options to pursue. And our plan is she'll be considering that information with Commissioner Rubio over the next month. And then October, we will be coming back to give update to our boards and commissions, including you all, and also the Parks Board at their October meeting. So I'm going to pull down my slideshow. I didn't see any hands raised, but I may have missed that. And I think you're also at time. If we had time, I was hoping to hear if there were other criteria you thought we should be considering or other options, but we also can get your feedback at your October meeting if you want to do some thinking between now and then.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think getting a copy of the presentation would be great to circulate with commissioners so that we can kind of chew on. It's a lot of material here. A lot of it looks familiar to me because it's similar to kind of the deliberations we had at the last Sustainable Futures convening. So I can follow it, but this is a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of public finance stuff, which gets pretty much in the weeds. So it's yeah, it'd be great to have a copy of the document.
But it's in the service of planting and maintaining trees. So
right. There's many paths to that ultimate goal, as we like to say. So yeah, we are at time. I don't want to hold folks over. So thank you again, Sarah. We'll get a copy of that. Any quick responses from commissioners before I close it out for the day? Daniel and Roberta?
Yeah, no time right now to get into the substance, but I just have a ton of comments based on my experience being on this panel. And I'm just hoping, is it going to be okay, Brian, Jen, if I send out something to the rest of the commissioners in advance of the next meeting, just to give folks time to read some of my reaction as representing the commission before?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Absolutely, that's great.
That's fine. Just a reminder to commissioners, don't discuss by email. That's something that needs to happen in the public forum in a meeting, but sharing information is fine.
Yeah, great. And Roberta?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to mention that a few years ago, within the last 5 years, a presentation on street trees was given to City Council. And I believe that at that time, the replacement value of street trees was estimated at something like $2.5 billion. And Sarah was talking about a goal of, or a target of kind of 3% of replacement value for infrastructure assets to put to place on maintenance. And if we put that 3% rule of thumb to the street tree maintenance, it would be about $60 million a year. So just kind of putting that out there, if there was a $20 billion or $20 million tax or a $20 million estimate to maintain street trees, that's well within a 3% of the replacement value, as I kind of figure it. So just something to keep in mind.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Those are some big numbers. It's great to have some of that at least to work with. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Full agenda today, as always, and look forward. If there are any agenda items that are coming up, we're going to have a little bit of time to talk about Forestry Commission priorities at the October meeting. So if there are things that are really rising to that, and Brian will send around some information as we discussed in our kind of check-in recently for our October meeting. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Looking forward to having your creative and thinking hats on for that meeting as well. So happy entry into fall. It's about a week away. Hope you're cozying up, getting some sweaters dusted off, and ready to launch into rainy season again. So take care. Good seeing you, and be in touch.
Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Everyone.